For millions of television viewers, Sara Gilbert will always be remembered as Darlene Conner, the sharp, sarcastic voice of Roseanne who spoke for a generation of teenagers. Her humor felt effortless, her timing perfect, and her presence unforgettable. Yet behind that confident screen persona existed a far more complicated personal story, shaped by pressure, self-doubt, and emotional struggle. Sara grew up in the public eye, but much of her inner life remained invisible to audiences who assumed fame equaled happiness. Over the years, she quietly navigated identity questions, painful losses, and the heavy cost of constant visibility. While her career thrived, her personal journey was marked by moments of loneliness and uncertainty. Looking back now, Sara Gilbert's life is not simply the story of a successful child star. It is the story of a woman learning, often painfully, how to define herself beyond expectations and beyond the roles that made her famous. Growing up with a famous legacy. Sarah Rebecca Abeles was born on January 29, 1975 in Santa Monica, California, into a family deeply rooted in entertainment history. Her maternal grandfather, Harry Crane, created the classic sitcom The Honeymooners, while her mother worked as a producer and talent manager. Fame was not a distant dream in Sarah's household. It was part of everyday life. Even her siblings were already television stars, gaining recognition and opportunities at a young age. Watching their success sparked both admiration and pressure within her. Sara wanted to prove she belonged in the same world, not because she was pushed, but because she felt compelled to earn her place. She eventually changed her last name to Gilbert, symbolically aligning herself with the family legacy she hoped to uphold. From an early age, she understood that expectations followed her everywhere, shaping her ambitions before she was old enough to question them. A child actor, searching for belonging, Sara began acting professionally at just 5 years old, landing her first commercial and quickly realizing that performance felt more comfortable than traditional schooling. She later admitted that classrooms left her restless and disconnected, while working with tutors on set gave her a sense of purpose. Acting provided structure, praise, and clarity, but it also came with isolation. Unlike most children, Sara spent her formative years on sets rather than playgrounds, surrounded by adults and expectations far beyond her age. Even as her career progressed, she quietly compared herself to her successful siblings, measuring her worth through achievement. That comparison fueled her determination, but it also deepened her self-criticism. By the time she reached adolescence, Sara had already learned to equate success with validation. This mindset would follow her into the role that defined her life, shaping how she experienced fame, pressure, and personal growth. Becoming Darlene Conner too young. In 1988, at just 13 years old, Sara Gilbert stepped into the role of Darlene Conner on Roseanne, instantly becoming a household name. Over 9 seasons, audiences watched her character evolve from a sarcastic tomboy into a thoughtful, politically aware young woman. Sara's performance earned critical praise, awards, and Emmy nominations, proving her talent beyond doubt. Yet fame arrived at a vulnerable time. While most teenagers explored identity privately, Sara did so under constant public attention. She later described herself as deeply shy, often feeling disconnected despite widespread recognition. Success brought admiration, but also loneliness. Even on other sets years later, she admitted to hiding from attention, overwhelmed by being watched. Despite these challenges, she remained disciplined, even writing an episode of the show herself. Outwardly, she appeared confident and capable. Inwardly, she was struggling to understand who she was beyond the character audiences adored: education, exhaustion, and quiet strength. Determined to grow beyond her sitcom image, Sara enrolled at Yale University in 1993, an ambitious decision that required extraordinary discipline. She balanced full-time studies with filming Roseanne, commuting cross-country every week. The schedule was punishing, leaving little room for rest or reflection. Still, she refused to compromise either responsibility. Professors respected her commitment, and critics continued praising her work on screen. Yet exhaustion became her constant companion. Beneath her achievements, Sara was quietly pushing herself to meet impossible standards, believing rest equaled failure. Education represented independence and intellectual freedom, but the strain intensified her emotional fatigue. She rarely spoke about this pressure publicly at the time, choosing instead to endure it silently. This period revealed her resilience, but it also established a pattern she would repeat for years, placing responsibility above personal well-being and carrying stress quietly rather than asking for help. Love, identity, and a difficult realization. During her teenage years on Roseanne, Sara began dating her co-star Johnny Galecki, mirroring their characters' romance on screen. What seemed like a typical young relationship soon became deeply confusing for her. She cared for Johnny, yet intimacy left her feeling unsettled rather than fulfilled. Over time, Sara realized she was grappling with her sexual identity, a realization that arrived with fear rather than clarity. At the time, Hollywood offered little reassurance to young LGBTQ actors. She worried about losing roles and being judged unfairly. Johnny responded with compassion, supporting her honesty without resentment. Their relationship evolved into a lasting friendship built on trust. Still, secrecy weighed heavily on Sara for years. She kept her personal life private, carefully managing her image, building a family and facing heartbreak. After years of privacy, Sara found stability in a long-term relationship with television writer Allison Adler. Together, they built a family and welcomed 2 children, creating a life that appeared grounded and loving. For a time, Sara felt she had finally achieved balance. However, after a decade together, the relationship ended, leaving her questioning whether lasting love was possible. The breakup was emotionally painful, even as both parties aimed to remain respectful. Not long after, Sara entered another public relationship with musician Linda Perry. Their romance was intense and hopeful, culminating in marriage and the birth of a son. Sara spoke openly about the sense of safety marriage gave her, yet once again the relationship ended years later. These repeated heartbreaks were deeply personal, but also public, compounding her emotional strain while she continued raising children and managing a demanding career. Loss, memory, and a changed legacy tragedy touched Sara's life again with the death of former Roseanne co-star Glenn Quinn in 2002. His passing deeply affected the cast, serving as a reminder of how fragile life beyond fame could be. Years later, when Roseanne returned, Sara and Johnny Galecki chose to honor Glenn by naming their character's son after him, a quiet tribute rooted in affection and memory. Just as the revival found success, controversy surrounding Roseanne Barr abruptly ended the show's original continuation. Sara publicly condemned remarks that conflicted with her values, drawing a clear line despite personal history. The fallout permanently altered the show's legacy and severed professional ties. Through it all, Sara remained firm yet composed, choosing principle over comfort, stepping away to save herself. By 2019, Sara's responsibilities had become overwhelming. She was acting, producing, co-hosting a daily talk show, and raising 3 children while processing personal upheaval. Eventually, she recognized that something had to change. With visible emotion, she announced her departure from the talk, explaining that her life felt out of balance. Leaving was not failure, it was survival. She later admitted that public discussions of her private life had taken a toll on her mental and emotional health. Stepping away restored a sense of control she had long lacked. She also began prioritizing physical well-being, embracing small, sustainable routines rather than perfection. Therapy became part of her healing process, helping her process loss and rebuild inner stability. A life defined by resilience, not tragedy. Sara Gilbert's story is not defined by one tragedy or controversy, but by the accumulation of pressure, loss, and resilience across decades. From childhood fame to adult heartbreak, she has continually adapted. Even when the cost was high, she remains devoted to her children, selective with her work, and committed to living authentically. While she may never fully escape the shadow of early fame, she has learned to step out of it on her own terms. Sara's journey reminds us that survival often looks quiet, not dramatic. It is found in boundaries, honesty, and the courage to step away when necessary. Her life continues not as a cautionary tale, but as a portrait of endurance. In choosing herself after years of being watched, Sara Gilbert proves that reinvention is not only possible, but necessary.